I don't care that you got kicked off your birthright trip.
You too are going to wonder why huge amounts of money is spent on this. Hi guys, so Birthright is a 10-day free trip to Israel that is given to young Jews between the ages of 18 to 26. Others say 32, but I'm meant to believe it's 26 because that's a common number that I found. However, the trip itself is based off of so much propaganda, just like Israel. You're going to see in this video how they're talking about Israel is based off of so much propaganda. Apparently supposed to make one more Jewish in inverted commas, and so they discover new meanings to their Jewish identity and connect with Jewish history and culture. But it's used more so as a tool as opposed to what they proclaim it to be. They use it as a tool to perpetuate Palestinian land, as you're going to see in the videos that I've put together for you, even some stitches and some reactions. And some people got kicked out for asking a question about Palestine, which is weird. Anyway, let me roll the clips and then I'm gonna be back.
Have you ever been offered a free trip to Israel? If you have, I'm sure you've been tempted to go, but I'm about to tell you why that's probably not the best idea. Spoiler alert, it's actually a really, really bad idea. Welcome to our new series, Boycott Birthright, and other free trips to Israel, where for the next 10 days, we'll be going over the Birthright Israel itinerary and exposing the harm behind it. So you might be wondering, what is Birthright? It's a free 10-day trip offered to young Jews 18 to 32 years old to visit Israel and the Golan Heights. But Birthright isn't the only free trip to Israel out there. Faith groups are often offered free trips to Israel, as well as new members of Congress. There's pretty much a free trip to Israel for any demographic out there. But Birthright is not just a free trip. It's a tool to perpetuate the occupation of Palestine. Well, how is it a tool? It's just a free trip to another country, right? Wrong. But that's what we'll be uncovering in this series. Yesterday, the first Birthright trip of the summer left from Chicago. Let's take a look at what they're up to. One of the main ways Birthright perpetuates the occupation of Palestine is by manufacturing a sense of ownership and entitlement over Palestinian land and erasing the history of the indigenous Palestinians that have lived on that land for generations. It removes the narrative of the occupation and the violent ethnic cleansing of indigenous Palestinians. Let's take a look at the itinerary here. Right off the bat, we see the words, "Welcome home." This is that manufacturing of that sense of ownership over Palestinian land that I was talking about. Foreigners are being welcomed to Palestine as if it is their home, while in the same vein, Israel is exiling and murdering Palestinians on a daily basis. Let's take a closer look. On this day, people on the Birthright trip visit Mount Carmel in Haifa. I want to tell you guys a little bit about what happened in Haifa in 1948. On April 21st and 22nd in 1948, around 60,000 Palestinians were ethnically cleansed from Haifa by the Haganah and Urgun Zionist militia groups. On the 23rd, the city was stolen from its rightful indigenous owners and used to establish the state of Israel. People who go on Birthright are not learning the experience of these Palestinians and not learning the narrative of the occupation and ethnic cleansing that happened to these people. They will see Haifa as a beautiful place because it is, but they will never associate it with the pain and trauma that was caused in order for them to be there in the first place. Not to mention that the Palestinians that were living in Haifa in 1948 no longer have the right to return to their land. They're not even allowed to travel there. By erasing this history and reality that still exists today for Palestinians, Israel is able to separate itself from its violence and rebrand as a beautiful, innovative country where people are able to have experiences that are so crucial to their identity that they'll remember for a lifetime. This is why Birthright is harmful. It's great to appreciate the beauty of Haifa. Palestine is a beautiful country, but it is unfair to appreciate it without acknowledging and supporting the Palestinians that were ethnically cleansed from this land just 75 years ago. The Palestinians that still live under Israeli occupation in an apartheid state. We can do better by boycotting Birthright. Do not go on Birthright or any free trip to Israel unless you want to contribute to the occupation of Palestine.
I really need my fellow Jews to think about why you were given Birthright, why you were given a free vacation to a foreign continent, okay? Who paid for that? And why did they pay for that? Why is the big question? Let's put on our little critical thinking hats, okay? And think past all of the welcome homes. Whose home? Ask yourself that. Whose home?
This is what happens when you ask questions about the occupation on a Birthright Israel trip. Welcome back to the 10th and final day of Boycott, Birthright, and Other Free Trips to Israel, our series where we've been taking a trip of our own and following the Birthright itinerary day by day and exposing the propaganda behind it. So yesterday was actually the last day of the Birthright Israel itinerary, but I wanted to use today to really drive the point home that the solution to all of this is to boycott Birthright, because when you challenge the occupation on these trips, you'll see what happens. I'm going to be talking about Emily Block's story. She posted this in 2018 and she's a former Birthright goer. Emily describes her experience on Birthright and particularly mentions how she felt when driving by the apartheid wall, which she refers to as a separation wall in this article, but that's a very light way to put apartheid, but baby steps, I guess. Anyway, so she asks one of the tour guides a question about the apartheid wall, and she says that in response, he wouldn't or couldn't say anything about Palestinians' experience on the other side, and he even claims that legally, Israel never occupied Palestine, which is completely false. I mean, when she went on Birthright, when she published this article, and at the time you're watching this video, Israel is actively occupying Palestine. If you've been following this series, this probably isn't surprising to you because you know that Birthright trips are filled with propaganda, lies, and false narratives, but it's still shocking to see how aware Birthright tour guides are of this constructed narrative. I mean, if they didn't know, why else would they stop another participant from recording and even going so far as taking their phone and deleting the footage? It's because they have something to hide, and that something is 75 years of ethnic cleansing and occupation, and they are fully aware of it. So how does this story end? Do Birthright goers finally learn the truth about the occupation because one of them decided to ask a question about it? I'm sure you saw this coming, but of course that's not the case because way too much time and money is put into this propaganda tool to have a few Birthright goers ruin it. So, obviously, they were simply kicked off the trip. And that's because there's simply no room to talk about the occupation on trips like these, and you're better off listening to the demands of Palestinians and boycotting Birthright and all trips to Israel. I just want to quickly say that I don't bring up Emily's experience to idolize or center stories like these, but more so to show how aware Israel is of its use of Birthright as a propaganda tool, and to emphasize how important it is to just listen to Palestinians and boycott Birthright altogether.
I'm Jewish, which means I get to do the Birthright trip, which if you don't know, Israel does this thing where just because you're Jewish, you get a full 2-week vacation to Israel, which all sounds a little gefilte fishy. Like if the Catholic Church started offering free trips to the Vatican, I'm not sending my son on that trip.
It's been a weird day. We woke up this morning, we were staying on a kibbutz in northern Israel as part of the Birthright trip that we were on. First things that we saw when we got to Israel is we drove past the border wall. I raised my hand and stood up on the bus and was just like, did we just drive past the wall between Israel and the West Bank? And our tour guide was like, yeah, thank you so much for asking that question. Proceeded to go on like a 10-minute like speech rant about like Palestinians and how they're all terrorists and like suicide bombers and like completely without any like humanity for Palestinians. Yeah, well, it was like that the entire trip. Like the only thing we heard about Arabs and Palestinians is they're crazy, they're violent, and everything's their fault. And it was literally that black and white. Or anyone that can give us even like a sense of the Palestinian perspective, and he was like, I don't know of any program or person that could do that. He was very committed to us only getting one viewpoint, and like that's just how Birthright is. And
That's like part of the deal, is like you don't ask those questions, you like get your free trip. If you like leave your values like at the door, values that you want to hear more than one perspective, that's like, then Birthright's not the place for you to be.
he got kicked off.
I've not been a supporter of Israel since 2014, and one of the big reasons why is when I was in Israel, it is so incredibly just suffocating how much propaganda there is. And here's the thing, I'm from America, there's so much propaganda within that, but propaganda for Israel is at the core of its being. I was there for Birthright, and Birthright is 100% a propaganda trip to tour of just propaganda. Because here's the thing, you really have to think, please, anybody, any other Jewish person who was on a Birthright trip, think about, why was anybody paying for a free vacation for you? Because we love the Jews? No. Or because you're American and Israelis need Americans to side with you. So regardless, there's so much propaganda in Israel that it seemed overwhelming. Anybody that I would go up to would be like, welcome home, right? And it's so lovely, right? If you're very lost in the world, it feels so good. It feels so good until you started to hear how they were talking about Arabs. And I'm going to say Arabs as a whole. I'm not going Palestinians, obviously, but I am saying at the deep root of how much hate there is and how much spinning there is. Like, why does nobody leave us alone? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Why won't people leave you alone? You're on their land.
So it's been a weird day. It's been a weird day.
So I'm not sure if the video is from the people in the video, like if the post is from the people in the video, or if the post is a third party. But either way, here's to the two people in the video. I don't care that you got kicked off your birthright trip. Why did you go? Why did you go? If you're so against the apartheid and the treatment of the Palestinian people in the West Bank, babe, why would you go on your birthright? See, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I'm talking about. And you're not like a kid. And you're clearly somebody who's informed. You work on immigration. You care about burner walls. So how do you care about all that and still go on your birthright? Still claim Israeli citizenship? You are the problem. I can't, I don't sympathize with you. For real. Because what in your mind makes it okay to go on birthright to a place that your historical ancestors illegally settled and then get there and complain that it's like that? It just doesn't make any sense to me. It just doesn't make any sense to me while you're on the bus, you're driving back, and it doesn't make any sense to me that it took you that many days to say something either. I will never feel bad for a person for literally any reason. I know that is extreme, and I know some people don't want to hear that, but when I tell y'all, it is the hardest thing in the world for me to have empathy for somebody like that who really doesn't see how from start to finish they were wrong. And you're wrong on both sides. You're wrong from my side, you're wrong from their side, you're just wrong. And then I'm supposed to sit here and pretend like I empathize with you. I don't empathize with you. It is so hard.
So again, Birthright is a free 10-day heritage trip to Israel, Jerusalem, and the Golan Heights. The program is sponsored by the Birthright Israel Foundation, whose donors subsidize participation. The program's first trip took place in 1999, and since then, more than 800,000 young Jews from 68 countries in the Jewish diaspora have participated in Birthright Israel. It's known to be the largest educational tourism organization in the world. Now, participation in the Birthright has been called a rite of passage for young Jews. So, the Birthright Israel program was founded in 1994 by philanthropist Charles Bronfman and Michael Sternhardt. First hold, guys, have you seen what's happening in that video in the background? Like, you're gonna expect oh, it's a humble, cool tree, people just, learning things and all modest and whatnot, but that, I thought it was like a religious thing, It doesn't look religious to me. Okay, it's a government thing. And ever since, you guys, participation in this rite of passage, as they're calling it, has been increasing. And in 2007, they had increased to 20,000 participants a year. In that year, the late Sheldon Adelson pledged $25 million to Birthright Israel to take applicants off the waiting list and to increase annual capacity to 37,000 for 2007 and 2008. We jumped to 2022, guys. I don't want to go there. Man, it just beats me how black and white this is. They're not even going to think that you're going to think that they're just being crazy by telling you one side of a story while they paint the other black. And do you see the crazy amounts of money that they spend on this to just make sure that they play with your mind and make you believe, oh, this is making you more Jewish? I don't get it. Don't they understand the term birthright, even just birthright itself? So it's going to take a lot for Israel to always try and proclaim themselves over the land, spending huge amounts of money to just exercise control, to change people's minds, to try and push their narrative and their agenda just off of propaganda. You just believe something's just in the air, something in the mind, and yet people want to sit on that and believe that it is the truth. And to the ones that got kicked out of the birthright trip, I am so sorry that happened to you. But I do think that since you expressed the knowledge of knowing, you should have been more careful if it's just the experience that you wanted to have. Or maybe it was necessary so as to expose the whole thing of what goes on down here. I'm sorry, it ended up being like that. Otherwise, boycott birthright because they're just playing with your mind. It's based off of propaganda.